Hello and welcome to lesson number 2. Today I'd like to talk a little more about chords, expanding on the concept of octave regions and learning in layers that I discussed in my introductory video. In lesson 1, I showed you what I called tried and true chord forms in each octave region. Or in other words, I showed you one classic chord form in each of the 5 octave regions. So today, I'd like to expand on that a little further and show you how this applies to something you may already be familiar with, something called open chords. By way of review, here on my left, you'll see once again the 5 chord forms I showed you in lesson 1. So here once again is one tried and true chord form in each of the 5 octave regions. I'll be playing this in the key of G, so here's G in region 1, region 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now today, I'd like to show you these same chord forms in a way that's probably already familiar to you if you've been playing guitar for any amount of time. So first, let's take a look at the very familiar chord we play in region 1. Take a look at the diagram to my left, and I'm playing this chord, this major chord form. Looks like this. So take a look again at the diagram to my left and notice the location of the root. Most guitar players use the root on the 6th string for this chord as their frame of reference. So with this major chord form, as we move it up and down the fingerboard, this major chord form will take the letter name of its root, like this. So if this chord I'm playing here is a G chord, G major chord, I'm using this major chord form that I can move or transpose like this. So G, I can move it to, now it's A flat, A, B flat, B, C, etc. Now take a close look at what happens here when we move this chord form into open position. As I move this chord form into open position, replacing these notes I was playing with my left-hand index finger with open strings, I have what you may recognize as an E major chord, like this. So if I take G and move it to G flat, to F, and now I lose my index finger and I have E. You see this? Now watch as I rearrange my fingering like this, yet play all the same notes. Now this is a chord that probably looks very familiar to you but never saw it from this perspective before. You probably just learned this chord as E, but now I want you to see it from this new perspective as a movable major chord form in region 1. In open position we call this chord E because its root is E. Now notice what happens. As I move this chord form out of open position, I need to rearrange my fingering from this to this and compensate for the open strings by using my index finger as a sort of capo. So now, as I move this chord form out of open position, it changes from E to F. You see, now I have my first finger down here making up for those open strings. F to F sharp or G flat, G, etc. Notice we don't want this. As I'm moving this E chord, I don't want to just do this. I need to use my index finger to bar the fret here to make up for those open strings. So that was the major chord form in region 1. Now let's move on to region 2. If you look to my left, you'll see this major chord form I played in region 2, like this. And as before, this chord form takes on the name of its root. In this chord form, the roots are on the 4th and 2nd strings, here and here. Now watch what happens when I move this chord into open position. I take what I'm playing now is an F chord. If I move F, E, E flat, and D. You see, now I don't need my index finger anymore. So once again, the same principles apply. As this chord form moves into open position, my lowest fingered note becomes an open string, here on the 4th string. Likewise, I'll rearrange my fingering to make it more comfortable. So instead of fingering it this way, I'll change to this to make it more comfortable. And since this note on the 4th string is the root, this chord is now called D major, or just D, because we're playing a major chord form whose root is D. So we have this. And once again, notice as I move this major chord form out of open position, from here, say I'm playing D, and I want to play E flat, I'll rearrange my fingering like this, and I'm going to have to make up for this open string, so when I move D to E flat, on the 4th string, I'm using my index finger to play this note right here. So there's E flat and E, F, F sharp, G, etc. All right, so quickly, let's move through the remaining 3 octave regions. Next, region 3. Here's the major chord form I play for region 3. Notice in this chord form, the root is on the 5th string and the 2nd strings, and I'm barring only the top 3 strings on the fingerboard here. Not a full bar like this. So as I move this chord form into open position, I get this. So from what's now an F chord, I'll play from F, E, E flat, D, D flat to C. Now, rearranging my fingering while playing all the same notes, I get this. Something that probably looks very familiar to you, this C chord. Likewise, with this major chord form, all the preceding principles we talked about remain true. So if I want to move this major chord form out of open position, I rearrange my fingering, like this again, and compensate for the open strings using my index finger to act like a capo, only, in this case, only needing to cover the top 3 strings. So I move from C to C sharp or D flat. Remember, I'm using my index finger, so I'm not just doing this. It sounds pretty bad if you don't make up for those open strings, right? I do this, C sharp, D, E flat, E. Next we have the major chord form in region 4. It looks like this. This chord form is a little tricky because there are a few different ways you can bar the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings here. You can either use your 3rd finger, which is sort of the favorite among rock and roll guys, like this. You notice I shape my finger in such a way that you can still hear the 1st string sounding, or some rock players opt to just mute the 1st string, so you get this. That's okay too. Or you can use your 4th finger. I like doing it this way a lot of times because your 4th finger has a little smaller profile, so it's easier to grab in a pinch or move up a little higher with. Or on a classical guitar where you have more space between the strings, it's not uncommon to play the chord this way with your second, third, and fourth fingers all on the same fret. So that's a little hard on electric guitar, but on classical guitar it works. So whatever way works best for you is just fine. With this chord form, the root is on the 5th string and the 3rd strings. So as I move this major chord form into open position, I get this. So moving down from, here's E flat, D, D flat, C, B, B flat, and A. So now there are a few fingering options for this chord form in open position. So most likely in open position when you play an A chord, you can do it with fingers 1, 2, and 3, which is how the first way most people learn. I like doing it with either fingers 2, 3, and 4 because they're a little smaller. Or there's the James Taylor way of doing it, which is fingers 2, 1, and 3, kind of like this. And a lot of times I just grab it with my index finger, one finger like this, which is great in a lot of situations if you're just playing. Okay, works just fine. So that's kind of my go-to way when I want a quick A chord. And last but not least, we have the major chord form in octave region 5 that looks like this. Or this. To play all these notes is a bit of a stretch. If you can't stretch this far, please feel free to use a smaller or abbreviated version of this chord form like this. You can just use the top half of it. You see I'm just playing, here's the root on the top string and that much. Okay, or you can just use your 3rd finger and omit the 5th string. That makes it a little easier and still gives you that root in the bass note, like that. So in this chord form, once again, the root is on the 6th, 3rd, and 1st strings. And as I move this chord into open position, I get this from C, B, B flat, A flat, and G. Now this, in fact, is one fingering that I would use for a G chord. Another way that you may learn is this, with your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fingers. Either way is okay. Depends on what's most convenient for you, where you're moving to. That's usually what determines what works best for a particular fingering that you use. So if I'm going from here, this G, to C, this fingering works well. Or if I'm doing maybe this G to E minor, this fingering might be a little more convenient. So in open position, this major chord form in region 5 becomes a lot easier to play on all 6 strings like this, rather than doing this, trying to do all of it. Like I said, my shortcut to doing that instead of using the 5th string is to just mute the 5th string and do that. That works very nicely. I still get the bass note and it's a very nice voicing. And so in reverse, moving this chord form out of open position, either on all 6 strings or just the top 4 strings, right? We get this, or just the top 4 strings is this. I'd like to encourage you to take the next step and go through the same process with minor chords, then dominant 7 chords and minor 7 chords and so on. So thank you very much for joining me today, and until next time, keep practicing.